This is part 3 of the video according to the syllabus of Mumbai University for first year BA LLB 2024 syllabus. So in this video we are going to learn about the process of identifying, evaluating, interpreting and constructing arguments, which is basically a fundamental skill in elementary logic, particularly for us who are pursuing a BA LLB course under the Mumbai University syllabus. So here is the structured guide. First let's understand what is argument and how to identify arguments. Identifying arguments. Definition of an argument. An argument consists of premises. Basically, premises are statements offered as reasons, and a conclusion, that is the statement the premises support. So we have arguments or propositions, arguments or premises also. We can substitute all of these words, rather sentences also. But propositions have a true or a false value. So it has a truth value basically. So from these premises we come to a conclusion. So argument is nothing but it consists of a set of premises, a number of premises, one or more premises, and a conclusion which comes from those premises. So the key features of arguments is that it consists of premises and conclusion. Premises are statements that provide evidence or reasons, and conclusion is the statement being supported by those premises. Step 1. First, recognize the indicator words. Words like because, therefore, thus, hence, and since often signal premises or conclusion. So we'll repeat again. Words like because, therefore, thus, hence, and since often signal premises or conclusion. So how do we recognize these premises and conclusions? By looking at all of these words. Distinguish statements from non-statements. Now this is very important. Arguments consist of declarative sentences, not questions or commands. So if there are any questions or any commands, basically these two, they don't have any truth value. So we cannot say that it is true or false. For example, command open the door. Open the door has no true or false value. Similarly, question what is your name does not have a true or a false value. So but arguments have a true or a false value, and these are declarative sentences. So third point, focus on the main claim. Identify what the speaker or the writer is trying to prove. So this is about identifying arguments. How do we identify the arguments? Let's go on to the next point, evaluating arguments. Validity. An argument is valid if the conclusion logically follows from the premises. Again, very important, you have to understand that whether an argument is valid or invalid depends upon the conclusion which naturally follows from the premises. Earlier we mentioned that premises will be having a true or a false value. Generally, the thinker considers them as true and therefore proceeds to a conclusion. So an argument is valid if the conclusion logically follows from the premises. Let's look at the example. If all lawyers are professionals, which is first premise, and John is a lawyer, second premise, then John is a professional. This is the conclusion. So naturally, if you see from the validity statement, the conclusion that John is a professional is logically following from these two premises, premise 1 and premise 2. Now, for an argument has to be valid first of all. Then it is to be sound. That is, the argument has to be sound. A valid argument is sound if its premises are true. So this is also very important. First, validity. Second, soundness. Soundness we can find out, or we can see whether the argument is sound or not by looking at the premises, whether the premises are true or not. If the premises are false, then the argument is invalid and the entire argument is unsound. Strength. For inductive arguments, assess how likely the premises make the conclusion. For deductive argument, we need the conclusion to be logically following from the premise, but for inductive arguments, we need to assess how likely the premises will take us to the conclusion or will help us reach the conclusion. Steps: check for logical connectivities. Determine if the conclusion follows logically from the premises. If the conclusion does not follow logically from the premises, then it is an unsound, invalid argument. Assess the premises. Verify the truth or acceptability of the premises. Now again, it's the same point of soundness, which mentions that first we have to determine whether we can logically come to the conclusion from the premises. Second, we have to determine whether those premises have some truth value in them or not, whether it is acceptable or not. And then we have to identify fallacies. Fallacies are basically common logical errors like ad hominem, straw man, or false dilemma. So we have to look at all these errors. So we can evaluate arguments based on these things, which is validity, soundness, and strength. Strength is basically for inductive arguments. Let's look at interpreting arguments. Contextual understanding. Understand the argument in its social, legal, or philosophical context. So arguments will depend on where it has been made, under what context it is made, whether it's social, legal, or philosophical context. Pay attention to language nuances and cultural implications. Reconstruction. Rewrite the argument clearly, separating premises and conclusion. Ambiguity. Address ambiguous terms or phrases by clarifying their intended meaning. Steps. Let's break down the arguments. Identify each premise and the conclusion. Clarify the assumptions. Identify and state implicit assumptions. That is, assumptions which are there in those statements. Use formal logic. Translate arguments into symbolic or formal logic if necessary. We'll cover all of these later on regarding the symbols and the formal logic. Next, constructing arguments. Structure. Begin with a clear thesis or conclusion. Provide logically consistent premises before that and ensure a logical flow from premises to conclusion. So first, to construct any argument, we need to have a very clear conclusion in mind. Now, to come to that conclusion, we need to provide premises which are logical, which are correct, which are valid, which are sound. So based on these premises, we'll come to the conclusion. But first, we need to come to some kind of conclusion, and then before that, we need logically consistent premises for coming to that clear conclusion. Third is, we have to ensure a logical flow from premises to conclusion. That is, the inference has to be very clear. The flow, the process has to be clear. Now, the types of reasoning: deductive, inductive, and abductive. What is deductive reasoning? Basically, we have to understand that it is from general to specific. So general means all. So here we can see this, the term all is there. So when we say all, it is deductive. So all is general. All laws aim for justice. This rule is a law. Therefore, it aims for justice. So basically, this is premise 1. This is premise 2. And this is the conclusion at the end. So we have the deductive reasoning, which is basically general to specific. So when we get question in our university paper to distinguish between deductive and inductive arguments, we can say that deductive arguments is a process of coming to a reasoning from general to specific. We will learn about deductive arguments more in detail going forward. So basically, deductive arguments is general to specific. That is, all laws aim for justice. This rule is a law. Therefore, it aims for justice. Inductive reasoning. It is from specific to general, exactly opposite of the deductive. it takes a specific case and it applies to the general principle. So this case involved negligence. So this is specific. Many similar cases involve negligence. Therefore, negligence is a common issue. So it is inductive argument. Abductive is best explanation reasoning. That is, given the evidence, the most plausible cause is such and such. Next, define the conclusion. Clearly articulate what you want to prove. Support with evidence. Use legal precedents, statutes, or philosophical principles. Avoid fallacies. Maintaining logical integrity. Use persuasive techniques. Appeal to reason, emotions, or ethics as appropriate. Application in our BA LLB program. So as per this syllabus, this particular topic, this topic will help us into coming to critical thinking, improving our critical thinking, assessing the strength and validity of our arguments in legal and philosophical contexts, applying logical principles to case studies, legal judgments, and hypothetical scenarios, using truth tables, Venn diagrams, and symbolic logic to evaluate arguments. So this ends the topic regarding identifying, evaluating, and interpreting, as well as constructing arguments, which will help us build our skills in elementary logic. Thank you very much for staying around and watching this part 3 of the video. If it helps, share it with your friend. Thank you very much.